It's me again. Alright, so I'm just continuing where I left off. So remember, we have this nice looking mesh mostly, except we have this gross cucumber type thing happening on the edge. Obviously this isn't at the right angle. And then we have this really strange crease happening here. So if I go back to 1, we can see that there's just a ton of geometry here, the way that these edge loops were designed. And what that means is basically that Maya, when we go into the smooth mesh preview, is just trying to crease that basically as hard as it can. It's like, oh, there's a ton of geometry here. That's got to be a super hard edge. So the reason that this is happening is because I think there's just too many edge loops on this side of the crease. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete the one of these edge loops on each side. Here's another opportunity for me to talk about something that I haven't been talking about, is that when you delete edges, you should hold Control and press the delete key. Don't just press delete. The reason being is if I select this whole edge loop and I just hit delete, that just deletes the edges. So now if I look, we just still have all these vertices here. So Control delete deletes all of the associated vertices as well. So in this case, if I just carelessly press delete on those edges, we would see that all of these have now become n-gons, and I wouldn't even know about it because there's these secret vertices there that are invisible to the naked eye, right? So I'm going to undelete that, and I'm going to hit Control Delete, and we can see that there are not those vertices now. We have still a nice clean geometry. So if I look at this, now we go back. It's still looking weird, but we don't have as much of a crease there. Still kind of. So what I'm going to do, instead of adding 2 edge loops on this side of the crease, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one on this side. This wasn't cooperating with me last video, but it did in the break between the videos cooperate with me. So well, clearly it doesn't want to again. But all right, I'm going to try selecting this edge to let it know. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to create an edge loop on this side. So we can see this is going around the top cylinder rather than the bottom cylinder. There we go. So basically that runs up with less geometry down here, and if I go into the object mode, we still get a nice hard crease, but we don't have that weird like inlet. Instead, this looks like 2 pieces of metal fused together, which is exactly what I wanted. Cool. So that's great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix these the cucumber edges here. That's not a technical term. I just think it's funny. If you actually look at these things here, the reason I did fix this in the last video is because I'm actually going to bevel these edges because I think there actually is a slight bevel there. So what I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to go into the edge mode. I'm going to select this whole edge loop. So just double click on one of the edges to select the whole edge loop, and then I'm going to hit bevel. And what that does is creates a little bevel. That is too intense. So if we look at, well, that's not what I mean to do. If we look at this, it's very slight. So the fraction is the overall size of the bevel. I'm going to just set it at 0.1, and really that's probably fine. It's just like a nice, just one little machine type bevel. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this other side, because that also, I presume, is beveled, though, you know, I could try to get around to the back, but I'm pretty sure it is as well. So I'm going to reduce the fraction on that to 0.1, so we can then see that if I do that, it looks like a pencil. If I go to 1, that is pretty good. If I wanted it to be a smoother transition, so right now it's just like a 45-degree angle, basically, I could add more segments, remember, but I don't think that's necessary in this case, because I think if we go into the mode here, yeah, it does a pretty good job smoothing that out for us. I do think, though, that it is it's going in slightly too much. So basically, yeah, we can see this thing becomes just like this smooth angle. I kind of want this hard edge and then a little bevel. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some geometry right on the edge there to harden that edge a little bit. Then if I press 3, we can see, yeah, so it's now a little, that edge is harder. It goes straight from the cylinder to the bevel rather than just kind of smoothing into the bevel, which I didn't really like. All right, cool. So now we have a pretty good looking, I hope I didn't just multi-cut. All right. Pretty good looking thing. It's not quite at the right angle, so now I want to do that rotation I was talking about earlier. So I just want to slightly rotate it, something like that. Well, I mean, obviously looking at the reference will help. Yeah, it's pretty slight. Maybe slightly more, something like that. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then this is obviously way too tall. So I'm going to just, I'm going to select the edge loop. Well, not the edge loop. I'm going to select all the faces on top. So to do that, I'll just drag over the whole thing, but now obviously I've selected all these side things too. So I'm going to hold Control and then drag over those to deselect them. And that's the fastest way to select the end cap of something. Cool. Then I'm just going to move this down a little bit. How tall is this chair? I don't know what happens. I think it just hits the cushion. Yeah, it goes directly into the cushion. Cool. So we'll fix that later, but in this case, I'm going to just move this down. It's pretty short. Sorry, I keep pressing space instead of Alt-Tab. Yeah, I think it's about slightly shorter than the length of this other thing. Okay, no, that's too tall. That's too tall. I think this thing is just too long, in fact, now that I'm looking at it. But maybe I'll just scale it up. Yeah. This whole thing actually could probably bear to be thicker. Let me try it. I'll fix it later. I'm gonna do one thing at a time. I get a little frazzled while I'm recording these. Okay, so I'll just do something like that, and then we can also see. Oh God, it's way too long. Okay, I'm just operating on a different scale than I think I am. Okay, that's too long. Something like that. Okay, and then I'm going to move it slightly to one side, because you can see now that these are at an angle. They go back and to the right a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move just on these two axes. In fact, let's see if we can do this with the grid. Okay, something like that. If we do that, we look at this, I think it needs to go back further. Yeah, something like that looks pretty good. Okay, sweet. And then I'm going to delete the faces on here. So we're going to merge these this object into the other, into the giant cushion as well. So, but that's going to be later. So we don't need these faces. Delete them there. Cool. All right, so this is about ready to go. So that's one leg. All right, so I have a little bit of extra time in this video. I'm trying to keep each individual video kind of short. Obviously, that wasn't the case in the last video, but so I'm gonna get started on the next part. The next thing I'm gonna do is, actually, we do have those little feeties. I do want to do those. So I'm going to go ahead and add another cylinder, and this I'm gonna make sure it has 16 subdivisions. Let's see. Actually, no, we can do smaller than that. Because, okay, so obviously this thing is 16. It's pretty big. These things are way smaller. We can get away with a lower amount of subdivisions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the channel box. I'm going to hit polycylinder on here, and I'm just going to reduce the subdivision axes to 4, which is obviously very small. This thing is not round, which is a problem. But if we go into the subdivision, the smooth mesh preview mode, we can see that it actually becomes quite round, even with just that basic amount of geometry. So now I'm going to flatten this thing out, and I'm going to try to position it underneath these. No, I shouldn't use that one. I should move on these axes. Okay, that's obviously huge, way too big. Move down, and we want it to just be this tiny little. You can barely see it, just like it has like little supports underneath. So you want to really just like get all of the little details when you're doing high poly modeling. Stuff like this probably won't make it into the low poly mesh when we do the retopology, but it is nice to have those details. Because they will be reflected in the normal map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to line this up again as much as I can. Now I wish I hadn't done that rotation. Let's see if I can, how far back that was. Because now I do want it to be lined up. So sometimes, yeah, it helps to think about what you're doing before you do it. I don't do that. And then you wind up having to undo everything. So the reason I did that was because I do want it to be lined up cleanly like this, rather than having to do everything at a weird angle. So now I'm going to create a new cylinder. But I think it's good to have you watch me make mistakes, because then you realize that it is part of the process. These things do happen, and you just have to go with it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes in anything, but especially in modeling. So I'm going to reduce the size of this, and like I'm gonna eyeball it. Looking at this, it's hard to tell. Maybe at one of these angles, and they're pretty small. I think that's probably good, honestly. To have it, well, maybe I should see it in the perspective view before I make that call. But it might be a little small. So what I'll do is I'll actually scale it up to hit these edges instead. And now, okay, so now we encounter an issue in that if we see these don't line up well. So now I want to think about how many subdivisions. I have vertices here, 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 but it'll be intersecting at those 4 corners, but also these 4 corners. So what I'm actually going to do, there's no vertices here for me to do the snapping thing. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to increase the subdivisions on this to 8. And if we do that, we can see that they will line up a little more cleanly. We are going to have to edit it a little bit once we get to it. But okay, so now I've lined it up pretty well. Obviously, I didn't really choose a spot. This is too big. How small are these? You know what? I'm gonna do the 4. I'm gonna do the 4 because I think it's probably better to go too small than too big. That was just giant. Okay, cool. So now we've lined it up, and now I have to cut the hole. What I was gonna do is just figure out. Okay, yeah, it's closer to the edge than I'm doing it. Something like this probably looks better. Yeah. Okay. And now what I'll do is I'm going to line it up with the grid, actually, because we've been doing things by the grid. Oh, no. Object mode, select this thing. Okay. Cool. All right, so I'm going to do exactly what I did before. I'm going to select this other object, the back object, and I'm going to, oh, wow. Okay, so if we look at these inputs on it, obviously I've done a ton of this object, and the history is getting pretty big. So I'm going to click this button here to delete the history. Cool. Now I'm going to cut a hole in it to make room for this thingy. So let me, I'm going to select the other object. Now I'm going to do the multi-cut tool. Okay, so I'm going to line them up with the verts on the other one as close as I can get it. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Cool. So now if I go back to this perspective view, we can see, we can see that I cut them in the wrong face. So that happens sometimes, obviously, because we're in the top view. Whoa, what is that? If we look at the top view, it's hard to tell which side I'm cutting these in. So I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it in this perspective view as close as I can get it, and that's okay. So now I know I'm cutting the right face. I know I'm cutting the bottom faces rather than the top faces. And something like that is probably good enough. Okay, now I'm gonna click this object. I'm gonna hit Control 1 to isolate view. So remember that hides everything but this object. So I don't want to see the other thing, because I want to delete these faces back here. Okay, now I can hit Control 1 again. It pops it back in. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before, where I select the two objects. So I select this one, I hit Control, select the other one, and then I'm going to hit Combine. So that's the Combine button, and then what I need to do is move these vertices into each other. Well, now I kind of wish I hadn't combined quite yet. I'm going to line it up a little better. Move it up slightly. It's actually maybe a little too tall. Yeah, something like that. It's probably good. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to do the vertice thing. Let's do it. So now I combine the two, and then I'm going to go to Vertex, and I'm going to move these vertices into the other vertices. So I want to move the vertices on the little peg into the ones on the cylinder rather than the other way around, because watch what happens if I do the other way around. I hold Control and I move that. It messes up this whole cylinder straightness, and then if I actually look at this object, it'll wind up looking a little wonky. So instead, I'm just going to move this into there, and what that does, it keeps the cylinder looking good. Instead expands the peg. Okay, cool. So again, yeah, these things could be lined up a little better. I can move it. Yeah, oh, they're not combined yet. Let me combine these. So now, again, whoa, 9. Why do I have 9 selected? Where's the 9th vertex? The magical 9th vertex. It's this one. Don't want that one. Do we have faces in here? Oh, I didn't delete the faces on the bottom. Okay, so I should delete these. Okay, so I went inside the mesh right there. What I did was because there were still faces on the bottom of the peg that were inside this cylinder, and I don't want that. Because then the thing has to render those, and those are no good because we can't even see them. Why would we waste CPU on rendering those? So I'm gonna hit delete by type. No, I'm sorry. I'm gonna merge these vertices. So I selected the 4 vertices there because again they're not on top of each other. I mean they're on top of each other, but they're not combined. So I can move them separately. I want them to be one vertex because I want this to be one nice contiguous mesh. So I'm gonna hit combine, merge vertices. There we go. Okay, so now if we do this, there's none of that separation happening. Okay, cool. So we can look at that. Again, we've hit the same issue. So these edges flow into each other. That's good. But we don't have the appropriate geometry on this side in order to. So we have this edge loop here that goes edge, edge, and then nothing. It terminates in this vertex. And if we terminate in a vertex on an edge loop, a lot of the time we're creating n-gons. So I'm going to go ahead and create some more geometry. Exactly what I did on the other one. Around this cylinder. Go like this. Well, that is... The cylinder's not quite straight. Is it? Something's wrong. Okay. That's okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. As long as we have an edge that's going around, yeah, that looks not straight. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to straighten them because I haven't talked about this technique yet. So basically you'll notice that these vertices I just created are in like a weird curve. So we can see these are not like in a straight line. It's especially obvious right here. Like there's a big diagonal gap between these. I want them to be straight. So I'm going to select all of them. And what you can do if you want to align something straight like that, you select all the vertices and then you scale. Basically imagine you're pushing the vertices together into like pushing them to a flat plane. So if we look at these, if I take this scale and I push it towards it, we can see they're moving towards each other until they're in a straight line. Look at that. Now they're in a straight line. And what I'm going to do now, so you just do that a couple times until they're straight, and I'm going to push them so they're basically aligned with that edge there. Cool. And the last thing I'm going to do is connect this edge to here with the multi-cut tool, and this edge to here. So if we look at this, now we have a nice edge loop, and hopefully it'll let me select the whole thing. It won't, but sometimes it will. We have this edge loop that goes around the whole object like that, and we don't have any n-gons. Cool. And then if I go into the object mode here, I press 3, that's not quite what we want still, right? So it's not the edges are not hard enough. So again, this is I've been doing this a lot, so I'm going to add some more geometry. I'm going to add one on this side, and then let's see how that looks. It's still, this edge is still a little wonky, so whoop, I just undid. So what I'm going to do now is go back and add some more edge loops. I'm going to add one on this here, and then probably on this side too for good measure, and then on Q. Okay, cool. Something like that looks a lot better. I actually turned on one of the weird rendering modes, I think, but yeah. So when we put in the smoothing, we just have this nice round peg sticking out, and it's smoothly attached, good hard edges. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, but you don't have to watch me do that because you've already watched me do this one, and it's going to be the exact same thing. I'm just going to add another one over here. So I'll do that between videos, and then I'll come back for some new content. Thanks for watching. See you all next.